like we did last week during the first event in this series, we are welcoming here today some of the civil society actors and experts who have participated in this global community-based exchange initiative set up by GERIS. These people stand ready to tell us here today all about their experience in this project to which they have contributed over the past many months. This time too, we'll first hear from our guests, and then I will bring in questions and comments from our audience. Of course, our participants in the audience are welcome and actually encouraged to send us written questions and comments at any time during the meeting, beginning now if you want. And I will do my best to wave those into our panel discussion as we go along. Now, during the first event we held last week, we talked quite a bit about religious pluralism. So today we want to change slightly the direction and focus a little bit more on the contribution of our speakers and of the GERIS network in general to peace building and resilient societies. For this reason, we'll hear more today about the experience of our speakers in this project, but also about their related work outside this project in order to highlight some of the best practices, lessons learned, the skills transferred, and any changes that have occurred when it comes to peace building and diversity management in a constructive way. So, having said all that, I would now like to pass the floor to Marika Djolai, who is GERIS team leader and expert on peace, conflict, security, and development, for some introductory remarks. Over to you, Marika.
Thank you very much, Corina. I'm really grateful that you're here today with us and hosting this discussion. Good day, everyone. Good morning for some, good evening for the others. As Corina already said, this is a global exchange, which means GERIS project has global participation from 55 countries around the world. Some of our participants are just waking up, and the other ones are preparing to go to bed. I'm really proud that we had such a wide participation and that geographical distance and time distance didn't disrupt implementation of this project over the past 18 months. For the participants, you know a lot or most about what we have been doing together with you for the past 18 months. For our external audience, and I do hope that we have many of those as well today with us, Corina already touched upon some of the issues that we were addressing, so I'm not going to repeat that, and I'm sure it's going to come up in the conversation. But I would just like to emphasize a couple of outcomes, really important outcomes that we managed to achieve with this project implementation. So GERIS project is an EU-funded project, and we have been working closely with the European Commission, colleagues at the External Action Service and Foreign Policy Instruments for the past nearly 3 years implementing this project. We were focusing on 6 different project themes, but ultimately they all go towards social inclusion, how religious and non-religious actors support social inclusion, and how it helps build societal resilience together with the community members that they're working on. We, for example, we had 6 project countries and visited Belgium, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Morocco, Indonesia, South Africa, and the United States. And we visited these countries because we wanted to see some practical examples and to hear from the stakeholders on the ground how they're engaging with these issues. Most importantly, all GERIS network members make a contribution to their societies, to be more peaceful, to respect each other. Most of them focus on human rights or minority rights or protection of marginalized and excluded populations, those who are most in need. And I think this is really a crucial point in the world today, because with all the crises that we are facing, ultimately our work of the GERIS Network members, colleagues, their individual organizations, but everyone they're in touch with as well, and you, our audiences, is about trying to stabilize what at the moment is really disrupted. And that is why we thought today we can address issues of diversity on the one hand, but then about peace and how we build it on the other hand. I will stop here and hand over to Corina. And just to reiterate what she already said, please send your questions. This is an interactive discussion, and we would love to hear from you and to get an opportunity to engage.
Thank you very much, Marika. We will now move to the panel discussion. Welcome back. It is my pleasure to introduce to you now our distinguished panelists, including Ratul Dev, who is Executive Director of GEN Lab, a civil society organization from Bangladesh working on peace building and climate change. Then, as part of GERIS, Ratul worked quite closely with Ayselin Yildiz, who is Associate Professor and UNESCO Chair on International Migration at Yasar University in Turkey. Then we have Ratih Ananda Putri. She is Business and Human Rights Specialist at the Foundation for International Human Rights Reporting Standards in Indonesia. Also from Indonesia, we have with us Jeny Elna Muhapale, who is a woman pastor at the Protestant Church of Maluku, and also the director of Saju Salem Foundation. We also have with us Jeff Berger, community activist and Orthodox rabbi at the oldest synagogue in the United Kingdom, which is the Spanish and Portuguese Jews congregation. And last but certainly not least, I'm very pleased to introduce to you Janie Dumbleton, who is Associate Assistant Director, I apologize, at the Tannenbaum Center for Interreligious Understanding in the United States. A very warm welcome also to all of you. Thank you very much for taking the trip to come all the way here to Brussels to share from your experience and expertise today.
Thank you for having us.
And I would like to start our conversation today with one question, the same question for both Ratul and Ayselin, because the two of them cooperated on a micro project in the GERIS framework. And I want to invite each of you to tell us about your work in this context and the implications of this work that you see for the future. Ratul, do you want to come in first?
Thank you, Corina. Thank you for having me. So South Asia, as we see it, it's a melting pot of religion and different culture. I'm from Bangladesh, which is a South Asian, one of the major nations there. So we have lots of religion and cultures throughout centuries. And we have had our differences. But from the colonial era and the post-colonial era, it has been systematically injected so the differences turn into more ugly turn. And when we talk about today's topic, which is diversity and peace, and look on these areas, having those ugly turns and the mindsets together, the way we see it is, in recent time, there had been a lot of issues which is insurgent for intolerance. And we have always had our differences, but in recent time, we see kind of a threat to that. So from our organization, the organization I lead, GEN Lab, and with my experience with GERIS Network, the training and the exchange program I attended in Morocco. From there, and I have been working on this field since 2016. So we wanted to see how we can change the setup usually starting in Bangladesh and gradually in the South Asian area. So we felt that it would take at least a generation to actually change the intolerance we have had in our place. So to do that, we felt culture can be one way of doing it, and the inclusion of social media as well. So having all this knowledge, I went to the GERIS program, and then the micro project was a great opportunity that Marika gave us. Then I thought that let's do something on social media platform, because social media is actually a place where we can have people who have never met each other and from a different community with different mindset and total different thought. But it is a platform that's actually giving us the opportunity to mingle between people from different political background, cultural background, religious background. So social media, if used properly, it can actually alter our attitude towards seeing each other and change our perception and change intolerance towards a more tolerance and cohesive society. So we thought of designing a project that will actually amplify the opportunity of social media. And through social media, we wanted to infuse that cultural values. You know, in South Asia, though there are lots of religion there, different identities are there, but culturally, we are very much alike to many of us. So what we wanted to do is bring back those roots, which we are kind of forgetting, but those roots which talk about peaceful coexistence between religion and caste and races. So our project, which I shared with my friend there and few others, GERIS Network members, it was kind of like a social media art and culture based. Using the social media, we did some art and culture based program, some static post and video involving the youth leaders of Bangladesh, and after that some global leaders or the mass people who are engaged with peace building activity. So yeah, that's how we started, and then it actually started a dialogue. Sometime it went into negativity, and then we saw that there are people who coming to us and trying to change the scenario, and understanding each other's mindset is very important. And in social media, we have seen the rise of fake news as well.
Yes.
So we tried to train people through our networks how to understand what is fake news, what is not, and how to eradicate them and how to act. Our project is still undergoing. We hope to finish it very soon. But yeah, I think social media can be a great platform, and I'm grateful to GERIS for allowing us with the project.
Thank you very much, Ratul. Ayselin, how easy was it to join forces with Ratul in this project, and what are some of the what is some of the impact that you could see as a result of the work that you've carried out together?
Okay. Yeah, first of all, thanks to the GERIS Network that brought us together, because I've never met Ratul before, and that was the network provided us to come together and work on a micro project. And this is one of the also, I think, the very good contributions of the network. Ratul briefly mentioned about that. You know, he works on creating this digitalization and on promoting tolerance in South Asia. So there is the case there. But, you know, I live in Turkey, and in Turkey, it's the country that hosts the highest number of refugees in the world. We're currently hosting about 4 million Syrians, and in addition to 350,000 people that are under international protection from various countries. So actually migration is the topic that you need to work on: coexistence, integration, and tolerance. So what Ratul does in South Asia and Bangladesh is actually we benefit from his contribution, and we try to integrate it with the case that we have with the migrant societies, the vulnerable societies. And actually, the other part of the contribution is we are planning to write a policy brief on it. So we would like to disseminate our cooperation to other several cases. So with that policy brief, which will be published under UNESCO's series policy brief, we will have also the Spanish case, because we have one more colleague from GERIS Network, and an African one, and a Turkey. So that would be, I think, a good impact of the project that starts as like a little micro project, but a broader impact, as far as I hope.
Thank you so much, Ayselin. I would now like to turn to our guests from Indonesia, Jeny and Ratih. You both come from a place which is struggling with social exclusion issues and has witnessed also episodes of racial, ethnic, and religious discrimination. So could you tell us how your work, Jeny as a priest and yours, Ratih, as a human rights activist, provides solutions to this kind of issues, and to what extent projects like GERIS can help with your efforts? Maybe we start from Jeny.
Okay, thank you, Corina. As you know, Indonesia, as well as other countries in the world, has a uniqueness. We have diversity in not only in religions, but ethnicity, and also tribes, language, and local customs. And it will become wealth for us, but it will become like we have in the conflict in 1999. As in my place in Maluku, in eastern part of Indonesia, we have experience of conflict. And it's bring us to the experience of traumatic hatred between Muslim and Christians, because at the moment religion become a scapegoat, and we learn from the women participations. We call it the underground movement made by women. They are traders in the traditional market. They share information between Muslim and Christian women, and they also share information about the plan for attack one another between Muslim and Christian. And based on this movement, it's built other organization movement for peace. I work in several community in village, several villages, Muslim and Christians, and we bring women, not only women, but also youth, and also children, and people with disability, and also transgender. We work together between Muslim and Christian and village governments to create peace building. And also for youth, we give the peace educations. It's mean that not only church, but all the other religious institutions, we work, we stand side with the peace, humanity, solidarity, and it is make a benefit for us. And also in this GERIS project, I feel very grateful that Marika also invite us to become this program, this work. Yeah, it's very big work, I thought, and it's very amazing work that it's enrich our work, what we already do and what will we do, because we have a lot of work to do after GERIS program.
How has it enriched it?
Yeah, it's make some other paradigm and some other approach to work also in community. You know, in this GERIS project, we meet with the very extraordinary people, wonderful people, that we work in the same spirit for peace, social inclusion, diversity, even in the different contexts. But we share our experience, and we'll learn much each other for this program.
Thank you so much, Jeny. Ratih, the same context, the same kind of issues, how do you approach it? How do you sort of try to make a difference?
Okay, thank you, Corina, for the time. So as we know that Indonesia is the most populous Muslim majority country in the world. However, the intolerance doesn't only happen with different religions, but also in the Muslim community itself. So I thought with this GERIS project, I work in a human rights non-governmental organization, and so I made human rights training because I believe through dissemination and through education, I can make a difference. So for the micro project, I made a training for religious school about human rights, about the importance of the freedom of religion, like people has the right to choose their own belief or faith, and yeah. I am really grateful for the opportunity, same like JD, because through GERIS project we not only get the opportunity to make the project, but we also make a network. I can meet people with different backgrounds and different race and different status, but we have the same spirits. We want to make the world a better place to live in.
Thank you so much. Indeed. Now, maybe I can turn to Jeff, because as a rabbi, I wonder how you see and how do you reflect on what Jeny has told us, and how you try to make a difference as a rabbi in your own community and constituency of believers, let's say.
Yes. Thank you, Corina. I'll start by echoing what my colleagues have said, that I'm exceedingly grateful to the European Union and to GERIS, and especially to Marika and Raphael for the opportunity to have been a fellow in this program. I wanted to begin by saying that it's a gorgeous autumn day in Brussels, and I had the privilege this morning of going to a neighborhood which is called Scarabek. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yeah.
And in that neighborhood, we went to visit the Art Nouveau architecture of what was 120 years ago a thriving and very opulent or upper-class neighborhood. And one of the buildings that we saw was a school. And it was explained to me by the architect of the renovation that is taking place that that school was built because they wanted to provide an opportunity for children who were not of an upper income, but who were from ordinary families, to come and appreciate the beauty of the Art Nouveau culture, and also to instill within them a sense of the values of being citizens in Brussels and for that matter in Belgium. And I think that there's something very profound about this idea of morals and values. And since I'm a rabbi, I hope you'll forgive me, but I'm going to refer to the Hebrew Bible. And for the purpose of increasing religious literacy of your audience or our audience, in the Jewish tradition, we read the 5 books of Moses through the entire cycle once every year, at least in the Orthodox tradition. And this past week, we began again the cycle from the book of Genesis. And in the very early part of Genesis, it says that God created humanity in the image of God. And it says that when the first human was formed, God breathed life into him, to what we call Adam, the ancestor. And this idea of the breath of life, I think, is really remarkable, because if nothing else taught us our commonality, it was COVID-19, which is a disease that was airborne and affected people's respiratory systems, made us around the world aware of all of the things that we have in common. And so when we talk about the idea of being created in the image of the divine, it tells me 2 things. It tells me, first of all, that we as human beings have a divine element which can soar to the heavens. We can do wonderful things if we wish, or we can choose to ignore it. It's up to us. And I think, if anything you take away from today that I want to contribute, is the idea of individual choice in making the decision to do good things. But the second thing about being created in the image of the divine is that we often try to recreate God in our image rather than to appreciate the divine image in its entirety. And being a participant in the South African program, for me was remarkable because we had a cohort that was comprised of people from numerous countries, many of which I'd never been to: Nigeria, Lebanon, Iran, India, Uganda, Ghana, Croatia, Malaysia, Burundi. And what was remarkable is that we had never met. We came together for about a week. We were experiencing the history of trauma, of unresolved trauma that was brought on by the apartheid era. And I think many of us went away feeling traumatized that in my lifetime, you know, why didn't I do anything to try and put an end to apartheid? And that was the experience that I had. But being with such a diverse group of people, and diverse in culture, diverse in race, diverse in ethnicity, diverse in sexual orientation, in every possible way, it made me see what I think is a bigger manifestation of God.
Sure.
What I perceived as being God as a Jewish rabbi is now completely different to a new understanding.
Right. So it was a means for you to discover that the commonality that we all share, commonality of problems, commonality of challenges, commonality of humanity, in a sense.
Yes.
And indeed, when I listen to you, not only that, I see that there's that in different ways, in different manifestations, we face the same problems around the world, and that sometimes, as you were mentioning the house, those problems are not new. In the past too, they were struggling with inequality and diversity, and they were trying to do something about it. And we are still trying to resolve these issues and find a way to harmoniously live together. So the question now, maybe if I turn to our experts who work on conflict resolution and peace building, Janie and Marika, how is GERIS trying to do something different from what has been done before? I mean, what is special about the approach of GERIS, in your opinion? What are its merits, if there's nothing special? How do you see it? Janie, do you want to go first?
Thank you, Corina. And also, it's such an honor to be here with my GERIS colleagues who I've learned so much from. So I bring them with me in my responses. It's an important and unique approach and program because it includes religious actors, non-religious actors, the media. And we look at Afghanistan, we look at Ethiopia, Yemen, Ukraine, and the rise of authoritarianism, nationalism, threats to democracy everywhere, including the US, where I come from. These are complex foreign policy issues. So the challenges to peace and security are real, and all of these require multidimensional responses and approaches, and a willingness to engage with religion and religious actors and the impact of religion. So the response actually requires programs like GERIS. It's necessary, and networks like GERIS, to partner with one another, and then to partner with the Track 1 diplomats, the Track 1.5 diplomats that we're seeing. So in peace building, we have, education, human rights, community activists, and what GERIS does is it's breaking down those silos and saying we all need to work together to do things across communities, across countries, across cultures to build a resilient civil society. And we got to do that learning from the Indonesia exchange. We saw how rich their civil society is because oftentimes the government institutions aren't affecting as much change as the community would like to see. So it's really up to the grassroots activists, like the people on this panel today. And as Jeny mentioned, like if we don't include religion in our responses to peace building or in conflict, it can become this scapegoat or this monolith. But not saying diplomats have to be experts in religious literacy, but they have to come to networks like GERIS and say, where are your experts? Who's doing the peace building on the ground, and what can we learn from that?
Thank you so much, Janie. What about you, Marika? How do you see this? I mean, you've led the project, and you know, you're in a sense the mother of all this. But we want to understand also how it looks from your point of view.
You know, I wear two hats in this project. One is my expert hat, so I'm an academic, you know, but with a background in peace, conflict, and development. I did my PhD in Bosnia on post-war recovery. I've been working with various organizations, community-based organizations, civil society organizations for a long time, doing research, doing analysis. So there was a personal interest, you know, my personal interest when I came on board of this project, and I dare say that it to an extent also shaped how the project looks, because obviously, you know, we developed methodology, and you know, I had the privilege to steer a direction of this project. So it's not completely separate. On the other hand, being responsible for the project implementation, obviously, I cannot focus on always on the content. You know, it's there is an organizational side as well, and it's sometimes it takes over on a project of this size, but it doesn't matter. I think what's really important, what we really achieved here, is first connecting people who wouldn't otherwise be connected, you know, because I think even international projects, they tend to work with smaller groups of like-minded or background, you know, people from similar backgrounds, whereas GERIS project tried to integrate everyone. And then we also, you know, we had like a dual position. On the one hand, being an EU-funded project, but also working closely with the EU on the project implementation. We had an opportunity to also continuously feed lessons learned and best practices and experiences from different activities on the project continuously, you know, for the past 18 months. And I think in that sense, we created an opportunity and a know-how to directly influence policies that already exist, to address some of the issues such as exclusion, such as conflict. So it's we created this multi-dimensional, if you like, platform, which is research and communication and media and exchange of experiences and direct connection to the policymakers, or EU policymakers as well, and I believe some of the national policymakers also. So in that sense, I think we have much more impact and much more say and much more listen as well about the issues that are happening now. And as I said at the beginning, you know, Russian invasion of Ukraine, terrible things that are happening there. Most of us have done work on a conflict in a conflict zone or in a zone that needed support for peace building. But I think this unique model is what really distinguishes GERIS project for similar initiatives.
Okay, and if we speak about some of these lessons learned and best practices that have been fed back based on the work that you've carried out, can you give us some concrete examples? I mean, I don't know if this is something also for the rest of you, not just for Marika, but maybe you can get us started on one example of a best practice or lesson that, you know, maybe you had maybe you knew that you were expecting it, or intuitively you were expecting it, but or something that was completely surprising that you learned out of it?
I think the biggest learning for us, for the project team, is I want to say proved, I don't know if that's the right word, but we have shown that that actors from religious and non-religious background can sit together at the table, can work peacefully, understand each other perfectly, especially if they're closer to the, to the community, if they, those who work with the community members continuously. It was an assumption in our desire that this bond, that how we are bonding them and facilitating the bond, that it is going to work out. But there was also concern that it may not work out and that we may end up with, some arguments and misunderstanding. But the biggest lesson, and I'll stop here and give the opportunity to the others, is, diverse actors from diverse backgrounds can work together, especially when they're focusing on the issues, like everyday life issues. And that's where I think where the main bonding is created, and it's the main enabler for their collaboration.
Yeah. So you're focusing minds on something concrete and relevant of broader interest. But I'm wondering whether in your work, for example, Ayselin, Ratul, because we spoke very concretely about your micro project, but also for the rest, if you've noticed, and I take one of the questions that our audience has posed, if you noticed any differences in the approaches that religious and non-religious actors have to societal issues. Anybody has...
If I may start from, as Marika mentioned, about the scholarly point of view and non-religious activists. So in my country, Bangladesh, or even I may speak for South Asia as well, traditionally the people who talk about peace building and harmony were mostly the people who are into religious professional practitioners, or recently the academicians. But the changes that we who are working on the ground, we have seen that to attract youth directly, or if I may term it properly, is the millennials and the Generation Z. These are the future generations who would lead the world. So to attract them directly to the process of, through the religious peacemakers, it's getting a big challenging at the same time, because sometimes they are not much into religious practice or not that much connected due to many social reasons. So we felt that there must be a synergy and connection between the between a regular from civil society point of view who can connect with the youths directly, and also can with that platform can create a dialogue among the religious practitioners as well. So that's what we have been doing for last few years. And then I got the trainings from the GERIS Network, and that actually helped us to re-believe in the pattern that I think balancing is the key in this. And one more thing is like the cultural diplomacy, you may say it, because the traditional academic way of doing things may not be attractive to the youngsters out there. For them, it should be well researched and thoughtful. Like what are you have to mingle it with their day-to-day life, the piece. Otherwise, it's just a topic for their discussion in the classroom, not a day-to-day practice. So we wanted to infuse it in their day-to-day life through their cultural activity or the things they like. It can be music, it can be arts, photography. So this is kind of a new thing that I got the opportunity from GERIS, and we replicated through social media.
And maybe because the issue of youth has been brought up, I'm wondering if Jeff or Jeny want to come in and tell us how easy is it for them to bring in youth in this kind of discussions and sort of, because Jeff, you mentioned individual choice, and it's true that individual choice is important, but how do we sort of give the right panoply of choices to young people, especially young people who might not be churchgoers anymore or who might be interested in other things? How easy or difficult is it for you to cast the net in such a way as to bring youth in the conversation and in this sort of dialogue? Jeff, do you want to come in?
Yes. So again, I'll start with a little joke. You know, we have a tradition that when a young man reaches the age of 13 or a young woman the age of 12, they become responsible for their own activities. We call that bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah. And this is a joke that I've heard also told by colleagues who are in the church. But what is the best way so they talk about a situation where the old building of the synagogue or the church has an infestation. What is the best way to help get rid of, right, undesirable rodents? They say that you call them all together and you give them a confirmation, or you give them a bar and a bat mitzvah, and then you'll never see them again. And that seems to be what we've experienced in our tradition, is that we educate the children. In fact, we indoctrinate them. Right. And then when they get to be 12 or 13 years old and they start asking themselves serious questions, we sometimes don't have the right answers to offer. But I think that that's been a fault of some of the institutionalized part of religion. And we have gone far beyond that today, to the point where we have focused on what is called tikkun olam, bringing about the correction or fixing a broken world. And when you announce projects, and in the United Kingdom, you know, we do a lot of different projects that are both just domestic but also international. When you tell young people that there's an opportunity for them to go to help dig a well in Ghana, and to bring some kind of support to a village that is struggling economically, the number of applications goes through the ceiling. Right. Getting them to come to a prayer service on a Saturday or a Sunday morning is almost impossible, right? Unless they have friends there who they want to socialize with. So we do a two-tier system. We try to make sure that these actions are socially enjoyable, but also we are addressing serious issues. Food banks, homeless shelters. I'm not thinking of all the other examples, but when you present that as an opportunity, young people respond. So because they're altruistic, because they're looking for something. And if I just can draw that back to this idea that we're created in the image of the divine, if we all have a little bit of God inside of us, we know where goodness exists and where it doesn't. We know when we're being, shown something that's wonderful, and we know that when we're also being sort of fobbed off or deceived by religion. So our job is to make sure that we stay authentic.
So we need to listen to our internal barometer, or I don't know how you would call it.
So listen to your heart.
Yes, exactly. But
and Corina, can I add something?
Of course.
For the youth part, I think I've learned something from. I was in Bosnia and Herzegovina field visit, let me say, and there the very striking thing I had as a lesson. We have visited some institutions, and some of them were like, I don't want to call them old people, but not young ones, okay? And you feel in each conversation that they are stuck with the idea of the experience. I know it's very traumatic, it's big pain, but the visits with the young ones were like dating beyond what happened. They have the hope. The others, they don't have the hope. They are like, this happened here, we are silent, that's a very traumatic thing. We try to rebuild our society. But the young ones are, they are beyond the narratives, constructed narratives, but they construct their own narrative. And they were like, they are taught 3 different histories at school. The same reality, but 3 different histories, 3 different narratives. I remember in Yaitse, I think, that guy, he told about, one story is a victory for someone, is a defeat for another, is a victory for another. And that was, but they know that they have to go beyond it. And that was maybe the little, but the very good hope that I got in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And it's the first time, I see like conflict, post-conflict society. I work on migration.
Right.
I interview with many migrants with stories of war, conflict. But it was so powerful in Bosnia and Herzegovina to see that you teach war, you talk about war, but that's the real thing there, the bullets, holes on the buildings, the graves everywhere you see, no one wants to talk about. It's silent, but it's there. And it was very powerful. I remember our group in the Museum of History, I think it was, and also the War Childhood Museum. We hug each other.
Right.
And it was so deeply emotional there. Some of us were crying. And I teach something, it's the lines of the book, but that's the reality. So, and last thing, for the first time, I experienced how religion can sometimes divide.
Right.
But it also acts still as factor of division. Because politics, unfortunately, instrumentalize
this religion.
Yes.
Right. Jeny, I come back to you and maybe link the two comments from Jeff and Ayselin. I don't know if you've been actually to Bosnia and Herzegovina as part of this this project, because of course you spoke of divisions between Muslims and Christians in your own country, but also I wonder if you also, like Jeff, have to sort of translate religion to young people in order to get them interested and practicing the values.
Yeah, in Indonesia, especially in my place in Maluku, maybe Ratih will explain also about Indonesia and youth in Indonesia. We have the community of youth in its religious. In Christianity, we have a community of church youth, and also in Muslim, we call it Remaja Muslim. And then we work in the both side together, bring them together and give their peace educations and create them to become an agent for peace. And they not work just only in their community, in only Christian or in Muslim, but they separate in their school, in their community, and become an agents in the community. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Ratih, do you want to come in on the youth issue? Because I know you work on that. Okay. And of course, you're a representative of the young generation as well.
Yeah, so as I already mentioned, I made a training. It's like a webinar, a human rights webinar for religious school in Indonesia.
Yep.
And I think that it is very important to train or to educate people from very young age that religion is a choice, that people have freedom to choose since they were young, because otherwise the extremism and radicalization that come, I think it's been there since people were not really recognized the importance of the tolerance. So when I did the human rights training, some people ask like, it's youth, and then they were asking like, why is it important, the human rights and everything? Yeah, we have to explain it little by little, because not all the people, especially in Indonesia, has opened their mind and want to accept the fact that people have a choice, and most people in Indonesia, like if you have one religion, you will be close to that religion. I think it's very important to educate people from a very young age.
It is important, but then how important is it to educate them about choosing a religion as opposed to understanding different religions and understanding the commonality in all religions, and then even more importantly, practicing whatever religion they embrace? How do you see it? In
my experience, in my country, we didn't have the opportunity to choose. I mean, like we follow our parents' religion, right? But I think if I could change like the education system or something, maybe it's better that we have the like the opportunity to learn each other's religions since the very young age. So we know like, oh, Christian is like this, Muslim is like that. I know that some universities in Indonesia already implemented, and that it's very good so that people know. But it's already implemented in the college. So like, yeah, I think it's better if the education starts from the young age, that people have the choices and have different options for that since they were kids. Yeah.
Thank you. Marika, I saw that you wanted to come in. Is it right?
Yes, thank you very much. Just a very quick intervention. I'm just thinking about youth and what my colleagues are talking about here. And I think there is a big pressure on youth. A lot is on their shoulders, because we talk about youth and it's like, oh, old people, they cannot change, or they're not willing to change, they cannot do this, the older generations, or they can't do that. But that youth, you can do everything. So we're just going to put this big burden on you and you deal with it. And I'm really hoping that what we achieved in GERIS project, because we had people from different generations, and also, projects are often either targeting youth or targeting women or targeting someone else, but it's not very often that there is a mix of youth and different generations and different genders, not, and plus the religions as well. And in that sense, I'm really hoping that by taking youth together with people who have more experience through project activities, through capacity building, I'm really hoping that we at least manage to send them a message. You're not alone. You're not expected to, bring better future just on your own. We're here. We have your back. We understand that we're different, because you're younger, we are experienced. But we have your back, and I think it's a really important message. And I think also what the other thing what Ratih was talking about, countries, I mean, especially for us who live in Western Europe or in the Western world, experience is different. There is a choice to learn about different religions. There is no choice. When over 90% of the population is one religion, and it's literally part of everything, then it's a different experience. And not being able to make choice, it's not necessarily a bad thing. So I just wanted to go back to what I said earlier. This project created, it's like a channel, for two-way communication, and I'm really hoping that us in the Western world have a better understanding, at least in how we frame discourses about choices or about opportunities or, about diversity ultimately. And that, I think, is a really good thing.
Yeah, and I mean, it's true intergenerational solidarity on this issue, if I can call it that, like that, is important. But I wonder how easy is ultimately to sort of change or open young people's mind when then they go home and their home environment and their parents are, as Jeff says, quite indoctrinated. And then, they find themselves in a little bit of a struggle. From your experience, how easy is it for young people to, use the kind of training that you do, Ratih, or the opportunities that of the other projects that you've set up to actually sort of come out of their shell and own their own life experience?
I thought when we put the young people in this issue, we bring them to the common good, the common issue. If we just put them in religions, so it's divide between Muslim, Christian, Hindu, and all other religions, but they face with the same context, violence. Like in Ambon, in my place, they're not faced with the conflicts directly, but they in the other generations. But when we talk about the violence, protections, and they will have their own perspective about that. They will have agreement about that. They have their own choice about that.
Right. So when it resonates.
Yeah.
Yeah. And okay. And maybe because when I listen to you, and we brought up the example of Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also in Indonesia, where religion still plays an important role, not always positive, and it is instrumentalized by the political level. To what extent is it then a question of sort of clarifying old age misconceptions about interfaith harmony? And maybe Jane, let's say from a more objective perspective as an expert, how easy is it to clarify such differences in the way we conceptualize the religious issues and translate them to social realities?
Yeah. Thanks, Corina. I think it's hard, which I think is why we're all here. It's not an easy thing, and we have to have different approaches. And it's reminding me of my experience in the Indonesia exchange, where there were religious freedom issues, and it's becoming divisive in Indonesia. But then we're seeing back to the youth and like the older generations. The youth are carrying the intergenerational trauma that they saw their parents go through and their grandparents. And from the human rights activists we met with, they're all younger and using this common language of human rights. That's what seemed, at least to who we visited, the stakeholders we visited, to be kind of this rallying call to people across all faiths and differences. It was really powerful to hear their experience also of how the identity politics in Indonesia play out now, which is why we have people like Jeny and Putri doing the work that they do.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
May I
of course.
One of the things that I've noticed is that there seems to be a parallel stream that is developing. On the one hand, people who maybe don't associate themselves as being religious choose to go down the human rights corridor. And amongst the rights that we are protecting are the right to religious freedom, but also the right to choose to change your religion, if you wish. And indeed, gender equality, and other things like that. And so that's one stream. On the other hand, you have the progressive side of the religious movement, which is advocating for much greater dialogue, interfaith dialogue, religious literacy, so that we are more informed of each other's practices and not succumbing to prejudice and stereotyping, etc. And it seems to me that the United Nations has started recently to try and bring a convergence between those two streams with a new program they're calling Faith for Rights. But I'm convinced that interfaith dialogue and religious literacy is one of the most important investments that we need to be making. And to train children, I said the word indoctrination, to train children that one particular religion is the only pathway to God, today is something that doesn't resonate any longer, right? I mean, I think we all subscribe, at least I do, to this notion that there are many pathways leading to the same divine source, right? And that's what we want to start celebrating more, and that, I think, is what the aim of true interfaith dialogue and development of religious literacy is supposed to be about.
Indeed, indeed. But when I hear you talking, you often mention education and dialogue, and of course, it's correct that those are probably reliable pathways to results, to effective results. But I'm also thinking that education takes a long time, right? So what do we do in the meantime or in parallel? What is it important to focus our energy on while we're changing mentalities and we're opening up perspectives of young people or older generations?
Social action. Social action.
Social action.
Social action.
And I think for people who work in NGO, it's very important to write. I mean, socialization also, but to write on the newspaper or the journals, maybe for academicians and researchers. I mean, we thought it's only a piece of writing, but if people read it, it could really create a big impact. I mean, yeah.
I think in the 21st century, education is different. So it's not just traditional education. You start for grade 1, then you continue to grade, I don't know, 8 or 10,
Right.
and then you continue to secondary school or high school, whatever it's called in individual countries. Development of technology has enabled or is enabling people to learn much faster. And in that sense, I want to say that education, we are in a position now that we can all, regardless of the age, go through a series of short courses really fast and learn much faster. And in that sense, that's, for example, why we, in GERIS project, why we focused on capacity building in communication. We had 4 trainings, traditional media, social media, policy communication, and storytelling. Exactly because you can, target a group and teach them something in a very interesting, but at the same time, very quick way. And I think, and one of the exchanges focused on diversity through education to Morocco, which is where Ratul went. So maybe he wants to add something to this as well.
Yeah. I heard you agreeing, so I wanted to bring you in. Yeah.
So the way I have seen education and the connection of religious and diversity, the traditional way of education itself is a learning process, but I think we need to inject the unlearning process as well.
Right.
Because it's not always what we have learned in our childhood, because I can relate to many things which now I feel it was not correct in many ways. That's one. And then second is, in subcontinent, in South Asian subcontinent, political government changes. Sometimes they change the history or the way of the textbook writings in a way that eventually these kids, when they passed out, they would eventually vote for them or think of an ideology that would support them in future. So this traditional way of education, I don't think it's suitable for, as Marika said, for today's time. So definitely different way should be incorporated, and parents as well as the community leaders should be a part of it altogether, because the traditional system is absolutely failing. And the access to social media and all this metaverse to the youth, at some point, parents don't even understand how this social media works, digitalization works. So even if they want to correct their children to the right path, they won't be able to.
Right.
So it's, I won't say we need to control anything, because that's not part of the human rights and all. But it's also important that we bring them under the process and then incorporate everywhere in a policy. So all these mediums can be used for proper understanding. And the last thing I would say, understanding different perspective is important. Like for me, when I started my work in 2016, all I have idea about Islam or Muslim is based on Pakistan and South Asia. But then I've through GERIS and other projects, I have been to Tunisia, Sudan, and other programs. My understanding about Islam is now very diverse.
Right.
Even I'm from a Hindu background. The Hinduism they practice in Bali, Indonesia, and we practice in India and Bangladesh are very different.
Sure.
So I think the traditional way and the script even is not the proper replication of what today's world is. So an open mind and more into reading and exploring each other's point of view is important.
There are other hands up, but I do want to highlight one issue that seems a bit paradoxical to me, because of course we speak about how important social media and technology is nowadays in sort of connecting people and enabling us to do things that would be impossible otherwise. And at the same time, you say that you were only able to broaden your understanding of Islam and other religions by actually engaging with these peoples and doing the physically traveling or interacting
seeing is
with
believing.
them.
So
seeing is believing. So would you say that actually you have to do the travel and you have to take the journey and you have to meet the people? It's not enough to be on the other side.
And it's not always have to be physical. It's not that you have to go from here to there.
Right.
You must have that mindset that I would want to learn them.
Right.
And you get the perfect ways and platforms to learn about different perspectives.
I see.
So it starts from within yourself. So.
Right. But if I'm not wrong, Janie wanted to come in, and then Ayselin, yes, on this education issue.
Yeah, that's what we call in peace building the contact theory. So you meet people who are other than yourself. You don't dehumanize them because you recognize their fellow humanity. And I like what you said, Corina, about we're putting so much burden on education sometimes, or at least in the US we do, and say, well, the education system needs to do this better or this better, but they're already overburdened. Right. So like Marika was saying, the power of storytelling and case studies so that people can travel kind of through their AirPods or whatever to meet people who are doing similar work somewhere else. And that encourages us to think globally and then act locally. And the power of story sharing. And then that's something we do where I work at Tannenbaum. We highlight religiously motivated peacemakers and talk about their techniques, which is kind of what GERIS Network does too.
Yeah, well, it's a bit similar to what Ayselin was saying at the beginning about Bosnia, that she was reading about these things and she already had a theoretical understanding about the problems, but then it really made a sea of difference to go there and see it with her own eyes.
Yes, but also in addition to this, I mean, youth and education, another example is that engagement, as Ratul raised, and I would like to underline the role of the donors and international actors, especially here, because in Bosnia, what we observed, the young generation's boundaries are set by parents, school, system, and the thing that they could only engage to each other, the diversity, was those funding programs, the EU, and you can criticize it. I mean, we should not also create dependency on such type of programs, but they were very useful means of ensuring engagement. And there, the young people were like, when you go home, you have a narrative, and on your shoulders, you have the burden of the past taught to you. At school, they told us they have walls, they have schools separated, but it was only possible with some international actors, let me say, intervention that brought them together. They meet each other like we do in GERIS. Yeah. And that, change of perception could only happen by engagement. So I think here the role of these international actors, in parentheses, I'm sometimes very critical of, but words to work on, I think. Yeah.
Well, when I listen to you, it's quite clear to me, at least, that GERIS has really had an impact on you individually, that it's really sort of triggered a change. And I mean, this is already huge, because you were already coming with open minds and quite a lot of knowledge about the subject and a bunch of good intentions about the change that needs to be created in the world. But then to bring in one of the questions from our audience. So apart from the impact of the project on yourself, do you have any concrete stories about how this project has actually changed the life of an individual or a group of people in your own contexts? Can anyone give a concrete example of okay, I saw change with my own eyes. It wasn't just in me, it was in somebody else.
I can start by one example, and then
yes,
other people
while they're
can
thinking. Yes.
while they're thinking. So we have this amazing participant, Wilfred, from Burundi. Unfortunately, Burundi is, not high on the list of countries that easily get visas. So he wasn't able to travel and participate in the in-person exchanges. Nevertheless, he was absolutely devoted and took part in every single activity and meeting, GERIS meeting, etc. He works on promoting rights of albino population in Burundi, which is both incredible and dangerous because there are lots of prejudices against albinos in Burundi. They get killed as children. There is the body parts get used by traditional healers. I mean, it's really awful. And we have seen, so he has worked, he had a micro project, he worked with the local albino population, with albino kids. He promoted, he organized a peace march. They walked through Bujumbura, everyone saw them. He designed this bright yellow T-shirts that they all wore, with GERIS logos, but that made them even more visible than they already are. But ultimately, it was super brave. But ultimately, he has managed, and then he had a bit of a promotion, a press conference, like a meeting workshop as well. But the main point is that he really, in this small act, managed to increase visibility of the albino population, and at the same time to show support that the EU is supporting this minority group, and by that, hopefully, at least, created a tiny bit of difference to send a message to those who disrespect their rights. Well, actually, there are big organizations, international actors who support, this group of people. So maybe think twice next time when you're disregarding them or attacking them, or instigating violence against them. So that's one example.
Sure. Very good example. Jeff, did you want to come in?
Yes, not as profound.
Right.
But in the South Africa program,
right.
There were opportunities to go visit houses of worship. And it was very important to me that in addition to a church and a mosque, that we had an opportunity to see a synagogue. And so we put the program, the country organizer, in touch with one of the synagogues in Johannesburg. And I have to say, it was really to me it was interesting because there were people who were on the bus who came from countries where whatever it was they taught them, I don't know, about, Jews, about the connection between Jews and Palestine and Israel and whatever, whether we have horns and tails and whatever. And as the bus was getting closer to the synagogue, you could see they were getting more and more tense.
Oh.
And we had a lovely tour. The rabbi was very gentle, and it culminated with a feast of, 4 different types of cake and coffee and
sure.
Right? And afterwards, the sense of relief that
could
I
read
heard,
it on their face.
Not just on their face, they were ebullient, talking about how grateful they were that they had, sort of challenged that ghost and overcome it. And I think, when we were on the trip, we talked about the difference between the comfort zone, the stretch zone, and the panic zone.
Oh, okay.
Right? Which is, most of us live in a comfortable place. Sometimes we're willing to expand our horizons and our consciousness, but if we go too far, it causes us to panic and to retract back into our comfort zone.
Right.
And this was a clear example of people who didn't want to be doing something,
Yes.
but they challenged themselves and overcame, and the result, I think, was positive.
And as a result, their comfort zone has expanded that much further.
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah.
And that is the aim of the model, isn't it?
Of course.
That we constantly increase our comfort zone.
Yes. And Ratih, I don't know if you mentioned, for example, that you did this course for young people. Has any of these students come back and said, wow, I learned this and, I never thought about this before and it's really making a difference for me?
Yeah, after the course, we have the question and answer session, right? And I didn't expect that there are a lot of students, they're in religious school, traditional school, and they're really interested about human rights, about the idea that also in Islam itself, there is a term of human rights. So I think the project was successfully made a change to them, and so because it's a micro project, we only did it once, but yeah, I think it will be better if we could do that kind of thing to other religious schools in Indonesia or around the world. Yeah.
And how much support do you get in Indonesia from the state in sort of carrying out this kind of activities? Is this something that civil society takes on its own, or?
So we invited speakers. So the speakers were someone from, and he worked in the University of Indonesia in the IMERC. It's the institution for the study for religion, but he also a former member of NU. It's like Nahdlatul Ulama. It's also a Muslim community in Indonesia, and also one of the speaker is also the former ambassador of Indonesia, which is also he was an expert of human rights. He was the former UN fact-finding mission to Palestine also. So yeah, it's really incredible that we got a lot of experts in one webinar. It's small, but the impact is really big. And not if not because of GERIS, these young people in Jombang, in Indonesia, wouldn't get the opportunity to learn from these experts directly about human rights and the freedom of religions.
Right, but yeah, okay.
I have also experienced. Even I am Indonesians, I have exchanged in Indonesia. GERIS give me a lot of experience. I met with Nahdlatul Ulama. It's the first time for me when I work as a religious leader in my place, but it's first time I met with the Nahdlatul Ulama, religious leader from the Muslim community, and then also I met with the Commission for Human Rights. I can ask them about the situations, how their perspective about the Ambon of Maluku conflict. And then once interesting is we met with the transgender boarding house. Yeah, and then we now in my place we work with friends that are transgender, and we now support them to have the legalizations of their community. And based on the experience that GERIS give to us, meet with the community of transgender in Yogyakarta, and I also tell the story, and it make them like have energizing to build their community and to meet with the church leader in my place to give their perspective about themselves and their community. Yeah.
Very, very interesting, indeed. Now, of course, when I listen to you, it to a certain extent, it sounds like, well, what a great opportunity. Everything went smoothly there, things fell into place easily. Everyone was happy, cooperating, getting inspired. But what about the challenges? Have you encountered challenges, concrete problems that you had to, sort of iron out in the process? Anybody can mention any, and how you resolved them? Jeff, you said, of course.
Well, yes. One of the things that I had to struggle with was we went to visit in the outside of Cape Town, very far outside of Cape Town, a high-level interfaith group that was comprised of academics and business leaders who were working to try and improve the rights of South African workers in the mining industry, among other areas. And we were sitting around a table having a discussion about South Africa and about apartheid and about illegal migration. And very casually, a professor sitting next to me referred to the Palestinian apartheid wall built by Israel. Mm-hmm. And it just set me off. It triggered me, terribly, because while I understand that South Africa as a country, going back to the time of Nelson Mandela, et cetera, would have been pro-Palestine and the Palestinian people, and I'm very sympathetic to the cause of the Palestinian people, mm-hmm. to hear it so casually mentioned in a conversation that had absolutely nothing to do with the Israel-Palestine conflict mm-hmm. took me by surprise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anybody has any other examples of challenges that, Jane?
When we visited with the transgender boarding school, I was reviewing kind of the program with a fellow participant who hadn't ever heard of transgender or thought, being gay was a bad thing. So it was a new perspective shift for me and a privilege check, to be quite honest, to think about how to lovingly explain a whole group of people, and mm-hmm. that was a challenge for me, and but also a really growing experience that we got to meet with mm-hmm. the community themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think, the project has put many participants outside of their comfort zone in the meetings with stakeholders, in what they've seen, in how they understand certain issues. Like we had a situation, although our program is not project is not specifically focusing, especially in the exchange visits, so meeting external stakeholders, on meeting with religious actors. Sure. We had a situation where somebody from a Muslim background got offended because we didn't visit a mosque, so there are lots of sensitivities that happened throughout the project implementation. What I said earlier is what was really impressive is that there were no significant differences, but in intention.
Right.
Right. So it's not in how things are done or how things are approached, but amazingly, among this diverse group of people from religious and non-religious background, there was no difference in intention, which is to help or this humanistic approach, if you like. It's even beyond. It's not just about rights, but it's really about this humanistic approach. But there were many differences, and as Jeff said, and others will say that as well, many challenges, but somehow, we always talked about that, and I know that not everyone left those conversations perfectly happy and content, but at least they were brought out to the table, and I think there is a value in that.
Okay, I see. And if I can take this then to a larger scale and ask each of you to maybe tell me what is, in your opinion, is a big challenge, not the biggest maybe, because that's always difficult to think of the biggest or the most important, but one of the biggest challenge that we face nowadays in the world, given all the crises and the problems that Marika has mentioned, for example, at the beginning. What is the biggest challenge we faced in securing peace and ensuring security in the world today? If each of you can give me their opinion of the one of the biggest obstacles that you see. Maybe we start from Ayselin, just to go in the other direction.
I don't want to say it like a cliche, but I think respecting differences, respecting diversity. Citing to the first conversation, I believe, this is my personal view, we don't need to love each other. You like it or not, but it's just respect. You don't need to take it, or you don't need to change it. It's just respect. And I think the second thing is this, the truth. And I find there, after this GERIS, I find religion more and more dogmatic. You know, and it's like, don't push people with those universal truth type of things. Every society has its unique ethics, truth. Yeah, we have some values, I believe. They are some very basic values for humanity all. But sometimes it's so Western-oriented, sometimes it's something oriented, but I don't like societies to be pushed by, you need to transform, you need to change. Actually not. Every society has its unique dynamics, and this project taught me, I've never met before like religious leaders and from different religions. It was the first time I've been to, you know, in dialogue with such people, and I learned. Sometimes I didn't like, to be honest. I don't like, but I respect.
Right.
And I said, you know, as long as we don't harm each other, we are in harmony. And that's not only religion, that's ethnic identities, that's all kind of gender-based differences.
So if I understand
We can
correctly,
survive together.
For you, the biggest challenge is trying to apply a one size fits all model.
Actually, yes.
And the way to deal with that is to practice tolerance and respect.
Yes, and we don't have one truth.
Right. Jane?
In Christianity, we have a parable about Good Samaritan woman. And Jesus transcends religious boundary between himself and that woman. He asked the water from the woman, and the woman gave the water. It's mean that peace require for mutual understanding, mutual trust. Yeah, and then it's not about you are religious people or not. Even for religious people can do the violence. Yeah, but I thought we fighting for a common good. Yeah, and it's very important for us. What question I want to give to you as a EU, is how GERIS this program can still stand for other generation. It's very important. I think about GERIS become one center of the study for peace, diversity. Yeah.
It's a good idea. It's a good recommendation. I do not represent the EU, but maybe I will pass the question to Marika. But before we get there, Ratul, do you want to give us your opinion about the biggest challenge we face for peace and security in the world? Then maybe a venture an idea of how to resolve it, but very shortly.
One would be like the way we define peace. It's mostly around religion and conflict, but it's not always like that. Like before COVID, I did a project in some northern part of my country, and it was kind of a storytelling thing for school kids. So we told them to write in a painting and art, how do you see peace? And we told them it's among the religion and your friends, this sort of regular sort of thing. So everyone actually came up with great paintings with people holding hands of Hindu, Muslim, Christians. But one girl, she she drew a table full with foods, all sort of good foods. That was unique and different. So we asked, why did you draw this? This is not what we told you to do. She said, this is peace to me because I don't have table full of food.
Right.
So that day I realized that peace has a different meaning to different people, and we actually cannot ignore one and just try to input another one. So it's for, as workers, as the ground level people of ours, we need to also know how the audience or the people we're working for, what are their needs and what actually triggered them towards intolerance. So it's not always funded or the donor-funded approach. Sometimes it should be both way. And our research should go on as well, because we are the one who work in the root, not maybe the donors. So that's one.
And when I hear you mentioning this, it makes me think of Maslow's theory of needs, and that sometimes you probably need to first take care of basic needs in order to allow people to have any kind of higher aspirations, like for peace and harmony and love. Maybe I'll go to Janie and come back this way.
Yeah, I think the rise of nationalism is probably one of our biggest challenges, but also the marginalization of people and ideas, and I think the power rests at the grassroots level with civil society.
Okay, thank you so much. Ratih, very briefly.
I think it's about the low tolerance that people have. I mean, religion is a very sensitive issue, and the biggest challenge is because some people think that their way of thinking is better than others, and they don't want to learn from others, and they are being closing their mind and don't want to learn from others.
Right.
Whether it's for religion or also for ethnic group and also tribalism and others. Yeah.
Humility, in other words. Jeff?
Yes, so I'll go back to the beginning where I started, which is this idea of the breath of life. And when we see ourselves as being part of the divine, and we see the divine in others, eventually we develop a sensitivity that when anyone suffers, we are suffering together with them. And it's that sense of purposefulness and inclusivity, unity, and obviously it requires humility to get to that point.
And it sounds to me like empathy as well, what you're saying. And because we're coming full circle, before we close, I give the floor to Marika.
Thank you, Corina. First, to answer Janie's question, I really hope that we have done enough to persuade the EU that this initiative needs to be institutionalized in a long term. So that's very obvious now, and I hope they hear us. And in terms of peace, I just remembered something, and I wanted to share what Jeff mentioned. So we visited the synagogue in Joburg in South Africa. It was happening during Ramadan, the month of Ramadan. And we had several people who were fasting in the synagogue, and they have to pray, several times a day. So while we were at the synagogue, this group excused themselves and went next door, and they did a prayer, their Muslim prayer, inside the synagogue. Do you remember?
Yes, and the rabbi welcomed them to use the
exactly.
Yes.
So, and we could see them through the glass, because there is a big glass wall. So and the rabbi was standing there, and he was saying, well, this is definitely the first one for the synagogue. But what I want to say from here is the differences are there, across the world, globally, and we cannot turn the blind eye to them.
No.
The good way for peace, for stability, is ultimately to expose each other to who we are, in a facilitated or in a completely natural way. And that's the way, I think, forward.
Wonderful. And in this sense, GERIS has prototyped the behaviors of the future, perhaps. So, yes. So it's a trendsetter in a sense. But we are almost 5 minutes over our time allocated for this meeting, but it was a fascinating discussion. I didn't want to interrupt our distinguished speakers, and I want to thank them very much for their very, very important work, first of all, for their participation in this project and for sharing their experiences with us today. And I want to thank also our audience and those who sent us in comments and questions. It was an absolute pleasure moderating this meeting today. Thank you very much. GERIS is a wonderful initiative. I think I speak for yourself that this is something that you want to continue formally or informally, and I hope that you manage to do that. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank